इस पॉडकास्ट को शुरू करने से पहले मेरी आपसे एक छोटी सी रिक्वेस्ट है। सब्सक्राइब बटन और बेल आइकन को क्लिक करिए, क्योंकि आपके ऐसा करते ही आप हमारी कम्युनिटी के पार्ट बन जाते हो। हमारी कम्युनिटी बड़ी हो जाती है और ट्रस्टेबल हो जाती है। ये स्पेशली इम्पॉर्टेंट होता है हमारे गेस्ट के लिए, जिनको हम बहुत मेहनत से अप्रोच करते हैं, और वो जब आते हैं पॉडकास्ट पे तो अपने सालों की इन्फॉर्मेशन आपके साथ शेयर करते हैं, जिसको आप आराम से घर में बैठ के सुन पाते हो। उन गेस्ट के लिए इम्पॉर्टेंट होता है कि कौन सुनेगा उनको, कितने लोग सुनेंगे, और ये सवाल का जवाब आप बहुत आसानी से दे सकते हो सब्सक्राइब करके। आपको सिर्फ इतना करना है, बाकी हम देख लेंगे। तो आइए चलते हैं, देखते हैं ये पॉडकास्ट।
No adolescent teenager will share everything with a parent.
Fair.
And let's take that as a given. Our children are a lot more aware of their emotional space than we are.
आज के टाइम में छोटे बच्चों के साथ प्रॉब्लम्स क्या हो रही हैं, क्या इश्यूज हैं उनको।
Even puberty happens at least 1 to 2 years earlier than it used to, about 20-30 years ago.
Yeah.
The changes in hormones etc. begin to kick in much earlier. तो मैं ये सोच के चल रहा हूँ कि पेरेंट्स कंपेयर इसलिए करते हैं, इस सोच से करते हैं कि child feels really sad and upset, they cry.
Yeah.
Adults don't do that. And some adults, after doing that for years, stop.
The question is, ये लोग मुझे थप्पड़ क्यों मारते हैं? Why do they hit me? तो आइए मिलते हैं डॉक्टर अमित सेन से, जो कि चाइल्ड साइकियाट्रिस्ट हैं, दिल्ली बेस्ड हैं। इनकी क्लिनिक बहुत फेमस है चिल्ड्रन फर्स्ट के नाम से। अगर आप एक यंग पेरेंट हैं या यंग टीचर हैं तो ये पॉडकास्ट आपके बहुत काम आने वाला है। What is it that we as parents are doing so wrong?
I think that as parents, we ourselves as adults don't quite know. Because how, complex the world is today.
The world has changed so
what
much.
to expose our children to, what not to, etc. Parents will often say that everybody is equal, we have to be fair to people, etc. But in their own political beliefs and the ways they see certain communities or the comments they pass about them, completely, rubbishes their claim to be fair.
What were you
and
saying
equal
and what are you doing?
And justice. Yeah.
Even speaking to the household,
Absolutely.
to the staff and the team
The way
at
you
home.
speak to them, you talk about equality, you talk about giving to people, etc.
Yeah.
And the tone of your voice, the demeaning manner, the way the plates in the house are separated, the way the food is cooked separately for your house help, is all those things contribute to a child's confusion about the world, right? And sooner or later these things begin to impact them, rubbish their experiences and that's what we tend to do because of how the world is and what they engage with, especially in years, adolescent years, which starts at 10, by the way. Adolescence starts at 10, not at 12 or 13 as we used to believe earlier. Even puberty happens at least 1 to 2 years earlier than it used to, about 20-30 years ago.
True.
So there are biological changes that are following some of the things that are happening in the world outside. With the experience that the kids have, they're, at a cellular level, at a hormonal level, things are beginning to change. These kind of double standards and mixed messages that we give our children, if we are very actively and openly admonishing some of the things that they engage with, that could include activities, it could include their peers, or the choices that they make. That can create huge problems, and it can alienate them, and and then they will engage with the outside world much more, that will impact them much more profoundly. And the second thing is, of course, they will have serious doubts about who they are. And that can then lead to all kinds of mental health difficulties, of anxiety, depression, substance misuse, self-harm, you name it, eating disorders, body image disturbances. That's another big thing. Our environment has a huge impact on how children view themselves vis-a-vis, their body image and weight and all of that.
Is it a self-driven thing, the body image consciousness, or is it more society-driven?
Young mothers now, the way they will restrict their own diet, the way they will use gym with the purpose they go for it, not for health. It is to actually look a certain way, or the amount of time and resources spent on, on clothes and
Yeah.
makeup and all of that is
Is a
to one
message.
extreme.
Is a
Yeah,
message.
It's a message. So
Yeah.
there are many things that are happening in the environment, both in their immediate surrounding as well as in the larger social media space that impacts their sense of what is pretty, what is beautiful, and they're constantly striving to do that. And with that, there's a sharp increasing eating disorders.
With that.
With that, yes, because of this. So, for instance, when I was training in psychiatry, as I said 35 years ago,
Yeah.
in the whole of NIMHANS, which used to actually have thousands of people coming from across the country for different kinds of reasons to seek help. Over there, in my 3 years of MD training, it was only once that we had a person with a young woman with bulimia. Yeah,
What's that?
bulimia is an eating disorder, right?
Okay.
And we all used to say that, in that ward there is this, young woman who's come. She has bulimia, and we would say, oh really? So we must go and see her then. Right?
It's a wonder. It was a wonder.
It was a wonder. And so in the books that we would read, which were Western, of course, there was a lot
A
more.
mention of that.
A mention of that and elaborate accounts of it, but we had never seen it in our.
In India.
In India, right? We never saw it. But it was after we actually returned back in the early 2000s. And over the last 20 years, there's a sharp rise in eating disorders, including anorexia, bulimia, and so on, right? And that is to do with...
Sure. Help us see this. What happens? So the eating disorder
Yeah.
in the young adults is
young
because...
adults or adolescents. So
Or
it
adolescents.
sometimes starts at 12, 13 even.
Is because of...
I mean, the way they view their own bodies vis-a-vis the standards set by society about what is pretty, what is beautiful. And a lot of what is happening in the fashion industry or in the cosmetics space, etc., is only fuels it.
Yes.
Because the models that you see over there
Yeah.
are all size 0. The models, the actors, etc.
Yeah.
The moment an actor begins to put on weight, they're not given the big roles. Yeah. And so on. So all those kind of messages that young people get from the environment, makes them believe at a very early age that if they did not become, size 0 or did not lose weight or did not look like this on their Instagram post, then they're a failure, right? And to be able to achieve that, then they go into extreme measures of cutting their weight by not eating or purging or weighing themselves repeatedly or going into exercising big time so that they shed all the weight that they have, etc. And that then eventually begins to affect their, emotional and physical health.
Because they're
in
not doing
profound
it with the
ways.
intent of being healthy. They're doing it with the intent of fixing
losing
something.
weight or fixing something. And so typically eating disorders can lead to very serious outcomes and take sometimes very long to treat, because once you're entrenched in that pattern, it's very hard to get out of it. So one of the highest rates of death in psychiatric disorders is an eating disorder.
So you eat so much or you eat so less?
So less that you eventually can
just not have the energy.
Not have the energy and actually die out of starvation or because your body electrolytes or fluids, etc., are so low that it can't support your body anymore. So one of the iconic cases or musicians, I don't know whether you remember, there was a duo or a band called Carpenters.
Yes. Yeah.
So they were a brother-sister duo.
Yeah.
And Karen Carpenter had anorexia. And she died of it. She died of anorexia.
My God.
Yeah.
So I have a few questions that children have put together.
Okay.
My question to them was that if you have an access to a therapist and the secret is not going to be let out, what is it that you want to ask? So the question is, थप्पड़ क्यों मारते हैं? ये लोग मुझे थप्पड़ क्यों मारते हैं? Why do they hit me?
थप्पड़ इसलिए मारते हैं आपको. Do you want me to respond in Hindi or English?
If you can, then that's great.
हाँ, आपको थप्पड़ इसलिए मारते हैं क्योंकि पहली बात तो शायद उनको थप्पड़ पड़ा होगा जब वो छोटे थे और उनको लगता होगा कि थप्पड़ मारने से कोई फ़र्क नहीं पड़ता है बच्चों में, बल्कि डिसिप्लिन आती है और वो उनकी परवरिश अच्छी तरीके से होती है, जो हमारे ख्याल से गलत है. इनफैक्ट फिज़िकली किसी को पनिशमेंट देना, उसका असर आगे चल के अक्सर गलत ही होता है और उससे कई ऐसी चीज़ें आती हैं, उभर के आती हैं बाद में, जो मेंटल हेल्थ प्रॉब्लम्स कह लीजिए, या रिलेशनशिप में प्रॉब्लम्स, या सेल्फ एस्टीम में डिफ़िकल्टीज, ये सारी चीज़ें उसी से उभर के आती हैं।
बट ये इनको क्यों नहीं
तो
समझ आता?
तो इनको समझ में नहीं आता है, और ये शायद इनके अपने जो एक्सपीरियंसेस हैं उसके वजह से हुआ होगा, और अपने फ्रस्ट्रेशन में, अपने गुस्से में ऐसा काम कर जाते हैं। कुछ पेरेंट्स ऐसे भी हैं, करने के बाद उनको लगता है कि शायद ऐसा नहीं करना चाहिए था, लेकिन फिर भी अपने आप को रोक नहीं पाते हैं। और कुछ ऐसे पेरेंट्स हैं जिनको शायद ये समझ नहीं है कि इसका इम्पैक्ट उनके बच्चे पे क्या होगा,
कुछ
आगे
नेगेटिव भी
चल
हो
के,
सकता है।
कि कुछ नेगेटिव भी हो सकता है।
ये
उनका
उनको पता
विश्वास,
ही नहीं है।
उनको पता ही नहीं है। उनका शायद ये विश्वास है कि एक दो थप्पड़ अगर पड़ गए या कभी मार पड़ गई तो उसका, हमें तो पड़ी थी, हमें तो कुछ नहीं हुआ,
और सब ठीक रहा
अब
हमारी
सब
लाइफ में।
हमारे लाइफ में तो सब ठीक रहा, तो फिर हमारे बच्चों को क्यों नहीं होगा। लेकिन उनको शायद ये समझ में नहीं आता कि उनको जो थप्पड़ पड़ा था उसका भी एक असर है, जो कि अभी निकल के आ रहा है आपके सामने।
आप अपने ही
जिस
बच्चे को
तरीके से
थप्पड़ मार रहे हो।
अपनी फ्रस्ट्रेशन को नहीं रोक पा रहे हैं आप, वो भी तो एक अंजाम है ना।
अपनी फ्रस्ट्रेशन को नहीं रोक
हाँ,
पा रहे हैं,
नहीं
अपने
रोक पा रहे
इमोशन को
हैं,
नहीं
अपने
कंट्रोल
इमोशन
कर
को
पा रहे हैं।
कंट्रोल नहीं कर पा रहे हैं, वो कहाँ से आ रहा है फिर, है ना। तो अगर आप थप्पड़ पड़ने से अगर सब कुछ आपके ज़िंदगी में ठीक हो जाता तो शायद ये ना करते
ये
आप।
नहीं करते।
तो यही मैं कहूँगा उन पेरेंट्स को कि, और अक्सर हम पेरेंट्स के साथ जब काम करते हैं तो ये बात उनके सामने रखते हैं कि आपको क्या लगता है क्या असर होता होगा। और आगे चल के कई पेरेंट्स ऐसे हैं जो अपने बच्चों को मारना बंद कर देते हैं।
पेरेंट्स बहुत इमोशनल अत्याचार करते हैं। इनको कुछ भी हमारी रिक्वायरमेंट होती है, सीधा जवाब कुछ नहीं आता है, बहुत इमोशनल तरीके से कि ठीक है हम तो तुम्हारे अच्छे माँ बाप नहीं हैं, ठीक है हमने तुम्हारे लिए कुछ नहीं किया, यही कहना चाह रहे हो करके। और इस चीज़ का हमारे पास कोई जवाब नहीं होता है, बट दिस इज़ नॉट फेयर।
हाँ, मैं समझ रहा हूँ कि उस पे बहुत प्रेशर पड़ता होगा आपके ऊपर, और आप नहीं चाहते हैं कि आपके पेरेंट्स को हर्ट करे, डिस्टर्ब करे, इसीलिए तो ये सवाल है आपका, है ना। तो ये तो मैं कहूँगा सबसे पहले कि आपका धन्यवाद करूँगा कि आप सेंसिटिव हैं अभी भी अपने पेरेंट्स की तरफ। लेकिन ये ज़रूर है कि अगर ये बार बार इमोशनल अत्याचार करते हैं तो वो है, मेरा मानना है कि वो एक एक्सप्लॉयटेटिव तरीका है। आपके इमोशंस को, आपके सेंसिटिविटीज़ को, आपका जो प्यार है आपके पेरेंट्स के तरफ,
हाँ।
उसको एक्सप्लॉइट किया जा रहा है।
तो
है
हम
ना?
क्या करें फिर उस टाइम?
तो पहली बात तो आप उनसे पूछ सकते हैं कि आप सीधा सीधा बताइए अगर करना है, क्या नहीं करना है, तो हम कर लेंगे अगर हमसे होता है। और ये भी बताएं कि इसका असर आप पे क्या होता है, इमोशनल अत्याचार का इम्पैक्ट क्या होता है। कई बार मैंने देखा है बच्चों के अंदर गिल्ट होता है, रिमोर्स होता है, वो पछताते हैं, उससे उनकी अपनी जो मेंटल हेल्थ है उस पर असर पड़ता है अगर ज़्यादा ये चलता रहे। ऐसा एक्सप्लॉयटेशन या इमोशनल अत्याचार अगर चलता रहे तो उसका असर सही नहीं होता। तो इस चीज़ को आप समझाएं, बताएं। अगर आप मतलब थोड़े बड़े हैं आप, और आपके पास अगर वो साधन हैं, तो इसका कुछ आंसर्स आपको नेट पे भी मिल जाएगा। उसको ऐसे आर्टिकल्स दिखाएं आपके पेरेंट्स को कि इसका क्या असर होता है,
कॉन्सिक्वेंस क्या होता है।
हाँ 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 हाँ।
Do children process emotions differently from an adult?
I think some of the basic emotions are the same.
Similar.
It is similar. But as we grow up and become adults, we become more self-aware, and we learn how to process feelings and emotions better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perhaps give it a name. Understand what makes me upset. What can we do to,
Combat
help
that.
or combat it? Yes. And children are learning to do that, right? And that depends on their age, their emotional maturity, self-awareness.
Yeah.
And a lot is dependent on the way people they have around them, the adults that are there.
True.
How are they doing it,
Yeah.
right? And they are constantly observing and learning from them,
Yeah.
right? So in that sense, you can say yes, the emotions that children feel, perhaps because they have not yet learned how to modulate it or repress it, that they're more pure or more intense,
Raw.
perhaps, yeah. And that you can see in the expressions also, right? So
Yeah.
when a child feels really sad and upset, they cry, and they cry very openly.
Yeah.
They bawl, they howl.
Yeah.
Adults don't do that, even if you, so
Yeah.
they'll suppress that feeling
Yeah.
there and then. And some adults, after doing that for years, stop being aware of certain feelings,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So the more we are aware of it, the more we learn how to deal with it, the more we understand the nuances of it, the more we understand the antecedents that create certain kinds of feelings and learn how to deal with it, the better we become.
एक बच्चे ने लिखा है कि वो अपने डर मेरे पे डालते हैं। उनको अलग अलग तरह के डर हैं। रोड एक्सीडेंट का डर है उनको, उसकी वजह से मुझे अकेले नहीं जाने देते हैं, जबकि मैं कॉन्फिडेंट हूँ रोड क्रॉस करने के लिए। और ये तो सिर्फ एक एग्जाम्पल, ऐसे बहुत सारे फियर्स हैं जो वो अपने मेरे पे डालते हैं। हमने बात करी है, मैंने समझाने की कोशिश करी कि आपका फियर है, बट उनके लिए वो दैट्स द एंड ऑफ द वर्ल्ड, ऐसा ही है, इट इज़ नॉट सेफ, बट आई एम फीलिंग वेरी स्टक अप। डू यू एक्सपीरियंस दैट कि पेरेंट्स अपने फियर बच्चे पे डालते हैं?
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल,
ये नॉर्मल
ये
है?
तो बिल्कुल नॉर्मल है। हाँ हाँ
Okay.
बिल्कुल।
तो जो
तो
बच्चे
उनका
का
जो डर
वर्ल्ड है वो ये है।
और वही काम जो वो खुद करते थे अपने बचपन में, उसी काम को अपने बच्चों को नहीं करने देते हैं कि आप पेड़ पे मत चढ़िए, आप रोड क्रॉस मत कीजिए, आप और बच्चों से
क्यों?
मत मिलिए क्योंकि वो आपको ख़राब कर देंगे, जबकि वो खुद अपने ज़िंदगी
खुद
में
कर चुके हैं।
ये सब कर चुके हैं। और हो सकता है कि अपने पेरेंट्स को न कह के
हाँ।
कर चुके हैं।
हाँ।
ये कई बार मैंने देखा है। और लेकिन ये भी मैं समझता हूँ कि पेरेंट्स के कुछ जो डर हैं वो शायद जायज़ हैं, विच आर टू डू विद द हाउ अनसेफ द वर्ल्ड इज़ टुडे। हाँ, आज का जो दुनिया है उसमें बड़ी सारी ऐसी चीज़ें हैं जो
सेफ तो नहीं है,
बच्चों के लिए सेफ नहीं होता है। बड़ी
नहीं।
सारी ऐसी चीज़ें हैं और ट्रैफिक भी बहुत बढ़ गया है, नो डाउट। लेकिन अगर आपको क्रॉस करना आता है और आपने सीखा है सही तरीके से, जो आप उदाहरण दे रहे हैं उसी पे मैं उस पर रिस्पॉन्ड कर रहा हूँ, तो फिर आप अपने पेरेंट्स से कहिए कि आप मेरे साथ चलिए, मुझे लीड करने दीजिए, आप फॉलो कीजिए, देखिए मैं कैसे क्रॉस करता हूँ, मैं कैसे क्रॉस करती हूँ, डेमोन्स्ट्रेट कर दीजिए। और ये भी बताइए कि देखिए आपका जो डर है, अगर वो हमारे ऊपर आप थोपते रहें तो उससे हमें भी डर लगने लगेगा, और हो सकता है और चीज़ों में भी डर लगने लगे, केवल इसी में नहीं। और अगर मैं डरा हुआ इंसान बन जाता हूँ तो कई ऐसे चीज़ें हैं जो शायद नहीं कर पाऊँ ज़िंदगी में डर के मारे।
उसकी शुरुआत यहाँ से हुई
और
होगी।
उसकी शुरुआत यहाँ से हो सकती है।
इसमें मुझे अपने पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से चीज़ याद आ रही कि पेरेंट्स कई बार ये भी हो जाता है कि एक चीज़ गलत हुई बच्चे से, गलत इन द सेंस उनके स्टैंडर्ड के हिसाब से कुछ एक चीज़ पूरी नहीं हुई, उसका एग्जाम्पल लेके हम कई सारी चीज़ों में उनको रोक देते हैं कि तुमसे तो ये भी नहीं हो पाया था, अब हेंस तुमसे ये भी नहीं हो पाएगा।
जी जी,
सो डीमोरलाइजिंग,
वेरी डीमोरलाइजिंग,
वेरी डीमोरलाइजिंग, एंड यू कैन डू नथिंग अबाउट फिक्सिंग दैट, बिकॉज वो नहीं हुआ था मुझसे, मेरे से खाना गिर गया था, प्लेट गिर गई थी, तो मैं रोड भी क्रॉस नहीं कर पाऊंगा, इसका क्या कनेक्शन, क्या है इसका? कोई कनेक्शन नहीं है, वो भी एंड अप डूइंग दैट।
पर ये पेरेंट्स को भी ये समझना जरूरी है, जब तक आपका बच्चा कुछ चांसेस या रिस्क नहीं लेगा तब तक ये स्किल्स नहीं सीख पाएगा। then your child will not be ready for the world outside. और उसको करने के लिए आपको in a measured way you have to give them freedom to
and
try
trust
their own
them.
selves and trust them to do it well. Yeah, and if you trust them, more often than not they will keep that trust, they will do things properly.
Yeah.
And if you mistrust them, it is possible that they will, because of their own self doubts, end up doing something wrong.
Yeah, हमेशा होता है, it's like you have a trust back home and you stick to that.
बिल्कुल।
So one child is saying that I really want to talk to my parents and I know they listen to me, but they don't understand this concept of mental health. Okay, so when I try and tell them that I am dealing with an issue, I am not able to get through. Okay, but I want to be one with them. Can you help me? How can I put my emotions in front of my parent in a manner that they will understand?
हाँ, that's a tough one. ये हमारे साथ बहुत बार होता है कि बच्चे 2-3 साल तक कहते रहे हैं पेरेंट्स को कि हमें ले चलो किसी साइकोलॉजिस्ट के पास, थेरेपिस्ट के पास, साइकियाट्रिस्ट के पास, हमें ये डिफ़िकल्टी है, और पेरेंट्स उसको नाकार देते हैं क्योंकि उनके मन में ये है कि मेंटल हेल्थ डिफ़िकल्टी होना मतलब पागल हो जाना या ऐसा कुछ सीरियस बात हो जाना जो कि आपको ज़िंदगी भर झेलना पड़ेगा। ये एक बड़ी बात है। ये जो this understanding of mental health, that once you develop a disorder or an illness or a problem, then it stays for the rest of your life, and that's what your identity will become. You will become, you know, a depressed person or a person with a learning disability.
वो label लग
जाता है और उसके बाद वो फिर हटता नहीं है कभी, ठीक है ना। ये समझाना, अगर आप समझा पाएं, और ये हमारी समझ है और हम इस पे विश्वास करते हैं कि जिस तरीके से हमें फिजिकल डिफिकल्टीज होती हैं और जो आके कई अक्सर चली जाती हैं, जब किसी को मेंटल हेल्थ डिफिकल्टीज होती हैं, अगर आप हेल्प लें उसके लिए, तो फिर द चांसेस आर दैट यू विल बी एबल टू ओवरकम इट। और अगर ये इस उम्र में करें तो फिर वो क्रॉनिक नहीं बन जाएगा। अगर उसको आप निग्लेक्ट करते रहें तो चांसेस आर दैट इट विल बिकम अ पैटर्न ऑफ बिहेविंग और बीइंग, और वो ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा क्रॉनिक होता जाएगा। तो अर्ली वी आइडेंटिफाई mental health struggles and do something about it, the better it is, the better the prognosis is. उतना ही बेटर उसका आउटकम निकलता है। इनफैक्ट जो बच्चे इन चीज़ों को पहचानते हैं अपने ज़िंदगी में, if they are able to identify it early and do something about it, they actually lead healthier lives later. Because they have sorted some things out very early.
And they've learned to identify.
And they have learned to identify it. They
Not
have
put it
learned
under
to
the
deal
carpet.
with stress, with things that are common and natural to human beings.
Yeah.
As human beings, हम सबके अंदर कभी ना कभी एंजाइटी होता है, कभी लो मूड्स होती हैं, कभी कभी डिप्रेशन के थ्रू जाते हैं,
Yeah.
और समझ भी नहीं पाते हैं कि ये ऐसा हुआ है हमारे
Yeah.
साथ।
Yeah.
जो हमारा पेरेंट्स का जनरेशन है,
Yeah.
उनमें अक्सर ऐसा हुआ होगा कि उनमें कुछ डिफिकल्टीज रही होंगी, लेकिन इट्स बीन ब्रश्ड अंडर द कार्पेट। हमने उस पर
That's
ध्यान
how
ही
our
नहीं दिया।
culture has been.
That's how our culture has been. और ये जो हमारा जनरेशन है, जो यंग जनरेशन है, वो हमें एक तरीके से एक राह दिखा रहा है कि ये देखिए, ये भी एक तरीका है टू डील विद लाइफ एंड यू नो समटाइम्स द चैलेंजेस ऑफ लाइफ। और अगर हम इसको एड्रेस कर पाएं तो
कैरी फॉरवर्ड शायद ना हो,
हमारी जिंदगी बेटर होगी, आपसे भी बेटर होगी। हाँ, तो ये इनफैक्ट पेरेंट्स, आई बिलीव, शुड सिट अप एंड लिसन एंड अंडरस्टैंड and probably learn from some things from the younger generation.
Lot
है ना?
to learn.
There's lots to learn from the younger people.
Lot to learn.
Yeah.
Comparison. There are 3 questions for that. मुझे बहुत कंपेयर किया जाता है। मेरी सिस्टर से कंपेयर करते हैं, मेरे क्लासमेट से कंपेयर करते हैं, खुद मेरे डैडी से कंपेयर होता हूँ मैं। आई हेट इट।
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल।
व्हाट शुड आई डू अबाउट इट?
पहली बात तो इट्स वेरी अनफेयर टू बी कंपेयर्ड, क्योंकि एवरी ह्यूमन बीइंग इज डिफरेंट। आप अलग हैं, आपके सिस्टर अलग हैं, आपके फादर अलग हैं, आपके क्लासमेट्स अलग हैं, और जिस तरीके से कुछ चीज़ें आप उनके तरह नहीं कर पाते हैं, आप में कई ऐसे गुण हैं जो वो नहीं कर पाएंगे, है ना। तो जब कंपैरिजन होता है, आप अपने साथ अगर करें कि मैं पिछले साल कैसा था और इस साल किस तरीके से उसको, जैसे सोचिए आप फुटबॉलर हैं, ठीक है ना, तो और आप कोचिंग के लिए जाते हैं, तो 6 महीने के बाद आप एक्सपेक्ट करेंगे कि आपके फुटबॉल स्किल्स, गोल स्कोरिंग स्किल्स, और इफ़ यूर अ गोलकीपर, गोल सेविंग स्किल्स, ये बढ़ जाएगा। किस तरीके से बढ़ रहा है वो, फिर 1 साल के बाद कहाँ पे आप पहुँचे, कौन सी टीम के लिए आप खेल रहे हैं। दैट इज़ अ फेयर कंपैरिजन विद योर ओन सेल्फ, विद योर ओन सेल्फ, कि मैं कहाँ था, अभी कहाँ पहुँचा हूँ। बट टू बी कंपेयर्ड विद समबडी एल्स इज़ एन अनफेयर थिंग टू डू। ये चीज़ को आप फ्लैग अप कीजिए, और ये अगर आप समझा पाएँ अपने पेरेंट्स को समझाइए, नहीं तो hopefully parents will listen to some of these conversations and understand that it is not okay. It only helps to dent the confidence of the young person. It does nothing more. It is not a motivating thing. What motivates people is if you sit with them and discuss what do they want to achieve, where do they want to get, what is their intention, what is their goal, what is their the purpose in life that drives them. तो मैं ये सोच के चल रहा हूँ कि पेरेंट्स कंपेयर इसलिए करते हैं, इस सोच से करते हैं कि कंपेयर करेंगे तो ये भी ज़्यादा मेहनत करने लगेगा, मेरा
मोटिवेट हो जाएगा,
मेरी बेटी भी फिर ये वही करने लगेगी जो उसकी कज़न करती है। लेकिन ऐसा होता नहीं है, उल्टा फल होता है, बल्कि डिमोरलाइज हो जाते हैं। उनको लगता है मैं तो कर ही नहीं पाऊंगी कभी ऐसे, है ना, बिकॉज दे आर वायर्ड डिफरेंटली, दे आर
तो ये उल्टा पड़ जाता है।
हाँ बिल्कुल, दे आर इन अ डिफरेंट स्टेज ऑफ लाइफ, maybe they don't want to focus on something like that, they'll do it later and that's okay.
और ये भी समझने वाली बात है कि अगर वो कर ही सकते या करना ही चाहते तो कर ही लिया
होता, अगर कर पाते तो कर ही लिया होता अभी तक।
I as a parent have gone through that childhood and I have memories of my childhood. Then how come I forget that when I become a parent?
That's true. I think some of that probably comes from a sense of inadequacy, or perhaps some failures that we've had, or sense of failure that we've had all through our lives, and we are constantly trying to overcompensate for that, and we believe that our children will do what we couldn't do, right? And perhaps it comes from there, and perhaps also from the lack of awareness of our own emotional state through our developmental years. Because there was no language those days. So if you look at the parents who are now young or older parents right now, they probably did not have schools or spaces in the family where they could talk about
Yeah.
their feelings or their lived experiences openly, especially the discomforting ones.
Yeah.
You know, the moment you would start talking about it, you'd be shushed or,
Quietened down, yeah.
quietened and told that this is a sign of weakness. You know, there is nothing like depression or anxiety. Just move on with life. If you have the courage, if you have the will, you can do whatever you want and so on, right? And we've heard those things
Oh,
as
yeah,
children all the
yeah,
time, isn't
yeah.
it? Yeah. And so there was no space created. And since there wasn't a space created, I don't think we are able to that easily. Sometimes, and I often ask parents or say this in parenting workshops, that have you ever caught yourself talking exactly like your mother or father?
Yeah.
And you do that so
Yeah,
many
yeah,
times.
yeah, yeah.
The choice of words, the
Yeah,
tone,
yeah.
is exactly the same. And
Body
that is
language.
because
Yeah.
you've modeled it.
Yes.
And it's kind of imprinted somewhere in your
Yeah.
head. And the moment that time comes with your own child, that's exactly what comes out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that attitude, that, judgment, that anxiety and critical tone, they all come out. They just pop out like that without
Yeah.
you thinking about it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And if you are not mindful of it, if you don't think through that, then you will do the same. In fact, make it perhaps much more complicated, because today's child has to bear with a lot more of information and inputs
Yeah.
from the world outside them.
Oh, yeah.
Because we have technology,
Internet.
digital media, social media,
Yeah.
what have you, right? So the influences from there are also affecting them, right? But if we are compassionate, if we are able to have a conversation about some of these things, chances are that they'll take your words and what you're saying more seriously, and not go and do what they have been doing in terms of expressing their distress. They might come and talk to you then.
Yes.
Right? But for that, you have to open up to the idea of listening, of being non-judgmental, of not wanting to find solutions immediately. Parents are constantly, immediately wanting to find solutions.
Yeah.
And that, again, I understand comes from a state of distress. Because if a child comes and says that, you know what, my best friend stopped talking to me, and the rest of the girls have turned against me and she's poisoned their minds. And you immediately think that, oh my God, is that right?
Yeah.
I'm going to go and talk to the principal and the class
Yeah.
teacher tomorrow.
How can they do this to my child?
And your daughter will say, no, I don't want that. I don't want you to talk to anybody. I'm just sharing this with you because... But if you did go and do that, then they'll probably stop sharing with you. So instead of trying to find the solutions, if you just sat and listened and took it in and being relaxed while you listen.
As a young parent, as a first time parent, जब मुझे खुद चीज़ें समझ नहीं आ रही हैं कि मैं क्या सही कर रही हूँ, क्या गलत कर रही हूँ, और वो बच्चा बोल नहीं पाता है, वो इतना छोटा है कि वो अपने एक्सप्रेशंस, फीलिंग्स ठीक से नहीं बता पा रहा है, और मुझे गाइडेंस मिल रही है बाहर से कि रोने दो, गिरने दो, चीखने दो, तो मैं कैसे वेल इन टाइम समझ पाऊँ कि मेरा रोड मैप क्या होना चाहिए?
ओके. अगर आपका बच्चा दिखता है कि इज experiencing much more of the negative feelings that are disturbing. So when children go through disturbing emotions, having emotional meltdowns or tantrums, or are really sad and crying, it's disturbing for adults also. If we are tuned into that, we can empathize, and from the empathy comes the compassion, right? Yeah. What is important to understand is that what is the emotional state you're operating from. If you're operating from fear and anxiety during that time, or from complete dismissal of it, both are problematic, right?
Yeah.
So if you dismiss it and say, you do what you want. I know it's an empty threat. Go ahead and do what you want. That's also very damaging to children, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm talking about now children
You're
who
like
are older.
threatening them. You are threatening a threatener.
Yeah, threatening. And that happens
Yeah.
ever so often.
Yeah.
That I don't care. I mean, it's वो तो करती रहती है. ये तो attention seeking है. वो करती रहती है. I just turn away and walk away. तो ऐसे कई बार हमने सुना है parents को कहते हुए, या young people say this, or you respond only when the threat comes rather than before that.
इसमें क्या डिफरेंस होता
तो
है?
इसमें जब अगर हम एंजाइटी और फियर से करें तो वही पैटर्न बन जाता है. सो अगेन द वे द यंग पर्सन intuitively or otherwise understands that till the time I have a crisis, my parents are not going to look at me. Right? Yeah. If I have an emotional crisis and I'm absolutely falling apart and I'm threatening something or the other, only then will they
So if
turn.
you want attention, you create the crisis.
So if you are able to give that young person attention at many other junctures where their life becomes richer and fuller, and do it not from a state of anxiety and fear necessarily,
Yeah.
but because we care, because we want to be a part of their lives,
Yeah.
because we have compassion, yeah, because we love the fun and excitement that we share with our children. If we are able to engage in many such occasions, then that crisis may happen less and less,
Right.
or may not happen at all.
एक पेरेंट का क्वेश्चन है कि हमें अब बच्चों पे हक जमाने से डर लगता है. हमारे पेरेंट्स हम पे हक जमा देते थे और हम फॉलो कर लेते थे, राइट? एंड दिस पर्सन्स एक्सपीरियंसेस कि इट वर्कड, इट वाज ओके, वो हम पे हक जमाते थे. बट जब वही हक मैं जमाने की कोशिश कर रहा हूँ अपने बच्चों पे, तो कुछ हुआ होगा दैट दे हैवंट डिटेल्ड, यू नो. बट इन्होंने कहा कि एज अ पेरेंट मुझे इस टाइम अपने बच्चे पे हक जमाने से डर लगता है. द क्वेश्चन इज व्हाट हैव आई डन रॉन्ग?
राइट. पहला सवाल तो मेरा ये होगा कि आप हक क्यों जमाना चाहते हैं, विथ व्हाट पर्पस? आप क्या करवाना चाहते हैं अपने बच्चे से, जो, और क्या हासिल करवाना चाहते हैं उससे? बिकॉज इफ यू बिलीव दैट यू नो द बेस्ट फॉर योर चाइल्ड, that in particularly in today's day is a problematic position.
Yeah.
क्योंकि दुनिया बहुत बदल गया है, and if we are not able to recognize that, उस चीज़ को समझना पेरेंट्स के लिए ज़रूरी है कि हम अभी एक ऐसे दौर से गुजर रहे हैं जहाँ पे हमें कुछ पता ही नहीं कि 20 साल बाद होगा क्या. तो आप कैसे कॉन्फिडेंस के साथ कह सकते हैं कि आप जो कहेंगे वो सही रहेगा आपके बच्चे के लिए? आपको खुद को नहीं पता. आपको पता था 20 साल पहले कि आज क्या होने वाला है? तो 20 साल के बाद जब आपका बच्चा बड़ा हो जाएगा, जब 30-35 साल का होगा, उसके ज़िंदगी में क्या होगा आपको क्या कैसे पता? तो फिर कैसे कॉन्फिडेंस के साथ आप हक जताना चाहेंगे जहां आप जो सिखाएंगे वो उनके लिए वर्क करेगा? कैसे होगा ये तो नहीं हो सकता ना. तो फिर हमें ये सोच के चलना पड़ेगा कि जो हम डिसीजंस लेते हैं उसमें अपने बच्चों का योगदान, उनका कंट्रीब्यूशन बहुत ज़रूरी है. क्योंकि जिस तरीके से वो ज़िंदगी के साथ कम्युनिकेट कर रहे हैं, जिस तरीके से झेल रहे हैं, हमारे ज़माने में वैसा नहीं था. तो उनका जो नॉलेज है वो इम्पॉर्टेंट है. और अगर हम कोलैबोरेटिव डिसीजंस ले एक साथ मिलके, तो उसका असर और उसका फल उतना ही पॉजिटिव होगा आपके बच्चे की ज़िंदगी में.
भले ही वो बच्चा कितना भी छोटा हो, हम अगर उसका ओपिनियन लें तो वर्क करता है.
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल.
पर उसको उसको दुनिया की समझ ही नहीं है, उसको पता ही नहीं क्या होता है. तो पर
अपने बारे में तो है ना. अगर एक बच्चा कह रहा है कि मुझे ये स्विमिंग पूल
पसंद है या नहीं पसंद है,
या पसंद है नहीं पसंद है, या यहाँ से डर लग रहा है, मुझे इनके घर नहीं जाना है क्योंकि वहाँ पे बहुत बड़ा कुत्ता है, तो ये तो डर है ना. और आप कहते हैं अपने हक जमा के कि नहीं, क्या बात है, ये डरने की क्या बात है कुत्ते से, आप ले गए तो उसमें तो शायद फोबिया डेवलप हो जाएगा, उसको एक एनिमल्स का, कुत्ते का फोबिया हो जाएगा. तो फिर वो आपका बच्चा कई ऐसे जगह पे नहीं जा पाएगा शायद. जैसे जितने कुत्ते आजकल दिखते हैं, सोचिए, हाँ, द स्ट्रीट डॉग्स दैट यू सी, वो तो शायद घर से बाहर नहीं निकल पाएगा. तो ये सारी चीज़ें होने का संभावना है अगर आप एक छोटे बच्चे का जो ओपिनियन है या जो फीलिंग्स है उसको दबा दें. अगर वो किसी चीज़ से डर रहा है या किसी चीज़ से अनरीजनेबली कुछ डिमांड कर रहा है, तो उसके साथ वो बातें हो सकती हैं कि देखिए मैं इसलिए ये डिसीजन ले रहा हूँ. अगर वो सोचिए, वो कहता है कि मुझे जो किचन सेट से नहीं अभी खेलना, मुझे तो आप वो जो रियल चाकू छुरी दे दीजिए, उसी से मैं करूँगी. और आप कहते हैं कि नहीं बेटे आपको नहीं मिलेगा वो, तो उसका एक रीज़निंग होता है क्यों नहीं मिलेगा, उससे क्या हो सकता है, वो कह के आप एक बाउंड्री बना सकते हैं. तो जब बच्चे छोटे होते हैं कभी कभी शायद ऐसे चीज़ों को डिमांड करते हैं या चाहते हैं जो उनके लिए हानिकारक हो सकता है. और उस टाइम पे एज अ पेरेंट यू हैव ऑल द राइट टू से नो, बिकॉज द सेफ्टी कैन बी जेपरडाइज्ड.
बट एक्सप्लेन
कि क्यों नहीं कर रहे हैं, और उसके बाद आप निर्णय लें. नो एडोलेसेंट टीनेजर विल शेयर एवरीथिंग विद अ पेरेंट, एंड लेट्स टेक दैट एज अ गिवन, राइट? सो टू से दैट oh my child is completely honest with me is again
too much to ask for.
I mean, it's I think a little naive, right?
And is it because of fear that some of those things are not shared, or is just too personal for the child?
It's their own personal space. We all have personal spaces, right? Yeah. And something that we want to keep very close to our heart, which nobody needs to know.
Nobody.
So even when children are growing up and adolescents begin to, let's say, date or have the best friends and so on, initially they believe that I can tell everything to my best friends. I
Yeah.
can say everything to my boyfriend or girlfriend,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah.
But soon they realize that it's counterproductive. It,
Yeah.
it comes back to bite them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you don't know how that information will be used
Will
at a
be
later
used.
date
Yeah.
when they fall out, right?
Yeah.
Or other things. It might get leaked out to another best friend of your
Yeah.
best friend, right?
Yeah.
And so on. So that's when they realize that there are some things that are very personal and it has to be there, right? I think again, equally, just as adolescents, teenagers will not share with you everything that is happening with their friends and peer group, they will not share everything that is happening in the family with their best friends.
So I've often heard parents saying that we've had this dialogue with my child, have made them understand the consequences of the screen time, but they don't listen. And they often say हम बस बंद कर रहे हैं, बस अभी बंद कर देंगे, but वो बंद नहीं करते हैं. Now every time अगर मैं बार बार बोलूँ उसको कि बंद कर दो, स्क्रीन बंद कर दो, so there is a love loss that happens between us.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
तो अब क्या करें? हमने स्क्रीन दिया, हमने restrictions करा, हमने controlled manner किया, had to do that. Now according to the parents, the child is not keeping their word.
So the best thing to do, of course, is to, tell the child that there's 10 minutes to go, in that 1 hour that you decided. It's 10 minutes, okay? Then you say 5 minutes, 2 minutes. And after the time is over, and they're still saying, no, I'll shut it just now and all that. Then if you're very generous as a parent and if you have a good relationship, you can say, fine, 2 more minutes and then I'll have to shut it down. And after that, you have to put your foot down and whether you
Be
take
firm
away
with
the
it.
screen, be firm with it, or switch it off from another source, or switch off the Wi-Fi,
Yeah.
whatever you want to do that. And there'll be a tantrum perhaps, right? But if you do that consistently, provided you have a good relationship, this will settle. This will settle down. If it has really gone out of hand, where the tantrums and the aggression and the emotional meltdowns are to an extent where it's become dangerous, then you might have to seek professional help. So sometimes with screen addictions, it becomes very resistant to change.
Yeah, that's what I've been seeing.
Yeah, it can become very entrenched, and it's then,
beyond conversation.
Then sometimes it can go beyond conversation, and then you might need professional
Then
help.
of course it goes in the space of lying and
Of course.
hiding. And
See,
all
the
of
thing
that.
is that, again, the other one thing that we need to know is that this generation is much more tech savvy than we are. And if they want to, use screen and we don't want to use them, they'll figure out ways of doing
Oh,
it.
yeah.
And they'll do it behind your back, or they'll do it in a manner that you won't even get to know. Or they'll do it from other gadgets that is not
can't
in the
fathom.
household. You
You
can't,
can't fathom.
and you can't find them. I mean, I've known children who have, got phones and smartphones from other sources, from friends, from uncles and aunts who gave it to them because they were not aware of what's happening at home and so on, right? Yeah. And they've bartered it and said that, I'll give you this, you give me my phone for so many days and so on, right?
Yeah.
So it becomes difficult
To
if you just want to clamp down. It does not work when you're just being punitive and oppressive about it.
Yeah. But let's go back to the childhood where it all starts from. Right? You've been constantly talking about this bond that a parent and a
Yeah,
child has,
yeah.
right? When we talk about coming to a therapist, or a psychologist, or a psychiatrist, in your clinic, what are the kind of issues in current scenario, in today's changing world, आज के टाइम में छोटे बच्चों के साथ प्रॉब्लम्स क्या हो रही हैं, क्या इश्यूज हैं उनको?
If you are a reasonably healthy family who have planned a baby and expecting one, you start nurturing the baby even when they're in the womb. And right after birth, there's so much of love and affection that is showered on
Yeah.
the baby, right?
Yeah.
The key relationship in the beginning is one with the mother.
Yeah.
And it begins from the physical touch to all the cooing and the eye contact and the lovely rhymes and songs and that absolutely
Huggings.
magical moments that
Yeah.
a mother and child spend together, right?
Yeah.
If the mother is going through her own challenges by by any chance, right? Which could be
Emotional,
it could be
physical.
depression or anxiety they might be
Yeah.
going through.
Yeah.
It's a big transition for many.
Postpartum.
Postpartum depression, it could be because they've given up their career and job. And the other thing that could is, again, as I said, the wiring of the child. So there are some kids who may not be able to, let's say, latch on when they're trying to breastfeed them,
Yeah.
right? Or they may not be able to sleep well in the night, and they may have colic, yeah? And those kind of things sometimes could also interfere with the bonding process. So some of the things that even in early childhood that impacts children is family life. So if there is, let's say, marital strife or domestic violence, or mental illness in one of the parents, right, or physical illness for that matter, if there are financial difficulties and a lot of worry and tension and concerns, oftentimes the child will pick that up, absorb it, and you see it then in their behaviors. And then, of course, once they start going to school, they are now exposed to a much bigger world, right? And then, and this begins to affect many things. And of course, if a child has a successful integration into school, begins to make friends, is accepted warmly and welcomed in school by their teachers in the initial years, if they're able to, kind of live up to so-called expectations of parents and teachers,
Yeah.
then they grow up feeling good about themselves. Of course, children often go through, emotional upheavals. There are some children who have meltdowns easily, right? And that's okay. That's a temperamental thing, and they'll get over it. If it is only that is concerning. But of course, if there is something not happening, or say for instance a child is getting bullied in their early years. Even bullying happens very early. So
Yeah.
even when children are 4, 5, 6,
Oh,
there can
yeah.
be bullying, right?
Maybe even
or if they're
earlier.
not treated well by a teacher, let's say in class, and or perhaps there has been too many transitions, change of school, or people leaving home, or deaths in the family, grandparents passing on, and so on. Those kind of things also impact children, right? Yeah, and they again may not be able to talk and verbalize those things very clearly, but it begins to show up.
ये जो ट्रस्ट ब्रेक होता है ये कहाँ पे जाके इम्पैक्ट करता है इन व्हाट यू एक्चुअली सी इन योर क्लिनिक?
So, of course, it manifests in various different ways, right? The first thing is a breakdown of communication. So, it is unlikely that they will come and share with you things that have happened in their lives, which they then think is going to upset you, or again, that you may be critical of, let's say, or which will lead you to put more boundaries and limitations. If they are seeing you as somebody who wants to control their lives, they will try their best then to make sure that you do not, right? Yeah. And they will then, hide or keep to themselves things that otherwise they might have shared with you. Which put them in situations which could be potentially risky in today's world.
Yeah.
So, no doubt that some children are smart in many ways, and I believe that they know much more than
Yeah.
we give them credit for. And some of the kids you'll find in the way they use language or logic or reasoning is very advanced and
Yeah.
mature.
Oh.
And so it's foolish to think that children don't know. They do know many things,
Sab
but there are some things perhaps they don't. The chances and the risks that they take and the kind of trouble that they can get into,
Yeah.
they may not be able to envisage or foretell that, right? And for that, it is important that you have a good trusting relationship where whenever they get into some trouble, or whenever they're taking a chance, they are coming and talking to you about it. Yeah.
But is this very individualistic, or there is a larger general framework for understanding emotions?
It's both, actually, right? So one of the things that differentiates human being is their wiring. Or the blueprint that we come with. Genetically, we're all different. And also in the very early stages of life, we have experiences that make us different in the way we respond to the world outside.
So wiring means the past.
So it's to do with also the brain and the way it's growing, and
Okay.
how the genetics is driving that brain. So for instance, again, there are some children who are extremely sensitive with food.
Yeah.
They'll smell things and reject it, or
Right.
if the texture is not good, they'll spit it out, right?
Right.
And there are other children who are not bothered with it at
Yeah.
all, right?
Eat
And so
everything. Yeah.
it's because they can't tolerate a certain texture or a smell, and that's the wiring. That's the wiring. And if we do not respect the wiring, then oftentimes the emotional problems begin to crop up. And their attitude towards things, whether it is people, adults, what life or school or home is demanding of them, begins to look daunting for those kids, right? Say, for instance, some kids will go to school and begin to, pick up alphabets and numbers very quickly.
Right.
And another child is struggling to make sense of it.
Yeah.
And they're not being able to put the sounds together. They're not being able to write well.
Yeah.
That's also part of the wiring, right? But the way we respond to that will determine what this child who is unable to do it will think of this difficulty or the challenge that they're facing, right? Or how they will process it. So if we come down with a lens of judgment and concern and worry, then they will also internalize it and think that I have a big problem. I'm inadequate. I can't do what the other kids are doing. But if we are able to sidestep it and say, oh, okay, that's all right. If we don't write, we'll address it later. But my God, you're so good in art. Let's focus on that. If we're able to shift the lens and look at it differently and understand that all children are wired differently and we have to treat them therefore very differently, then that same child might grow up feeling that, yeah, I have a challenge here, but I'm good at other things. So that story of the child is not what we call problem saturated. So stories of children begin to, they begin to internalize these stories that are told about them. The way they are spoken to, the way they are spoken about to other people, that begins to affect them. And they internalize that story and begin to think that, oh, I'm a naughty kid, I'm a failure, I'm dumb. These are things that kids can internalize.
All the time.
And that then begins to cause a range of things, from lack of self-esteem to, not wanting to actually engage with, let's say, the education process or in social situations, or become rebellious and become angry and upset with the world, and that is then seen as bad behavior. And that bad behavior is then admonished and punished. And when that happens, it only worsens the things that are underlying.
Absolutely.
The emotional bit is completely neglected then, right? We are only focusing then on the behavior. So those are things that we need to understand. For instance, a shy kid who doesn't want to, leave the mother in a birthday party will take their time. They will jump up on their mother's knees and says, and clearly indicating that they don't want to go and cut the cake or move out or go and play with other kids. And the immediate response from parents is, why not? Oh my God,
jao, khelo.
And that can be anxiety provoking for the child because they're not geared to do that. They're not prepared yet. They might do it in 6 months' time, in a year's time, but right now they're not.
Or even the same evening, maybe half an hour later.
They might absolutely may go and join the rest of the kids and start jumping and playing and laughing. But right now they're not ready, and it's not okay to push the child right then and there, right? And that's true for all kids. There's no rounded child who will do well in every aspect of their lives. There are kids who are exceptionally good in academics, even in extracurriculars, but struggle to make and keep friends. Or they might actually become so frustrated with their own failures, these so-called toppers and high achievers, that they begin to have depression and anxiety by the time they are teenagers. And we see that time and again, right? So there's no rounded, perfect child who is going to deliver in every aspect of parents or other people's expectations.
But okay, social media. So social media and online, बच्चों का point of view है, it's important. It's important for us. We can't stay away from it. Parents, no. As long as we can hold on to it, because it's very dangerous, it has a rippling effect. एक बार शुरू हुआ तो रुक नहीं सकता है. So as a doctor, क्या ये मिथ है कि सोशल मीडिया और इंटरनेट डैमेजिंग है बच्चे के लिए, या ये सही है?
Social media, the digital space, etc., has been a reality in our lives for at least 20 years now, right? और इसके ऊपर जो worries थी about how much of use is good and when does it become detrimental and damaging, that these questions have been asked for number of years. Many countries in the world to have done systematic research on it, right? और वो हैं Korea, Japan, China, North America, meaning USA and Canada, ये and UK as well. काफ़ी सारा research. By the time it was 2013, 14, 15 काफ़ी मटेरियल वहाँ से आ रहा था, काफ़ी लिटरेचर आ रहा था, जहाँ पे एविडेंस था कि अगर आप बच्चे ज़्यादा स्क्रीन पे रहते हैं, सोशल मीडिया, इंटरनेट, जो भी हो, जो भी उस टाइम का फैड है, या वीडियो गेम्स एक्सेट्रा, ये सब मिला के अगर एक बच्चा इतने घंटों से ज़्यादा करता है स्क्रीन, और उसको क्वांटिफाई किया गया था, तो फिर वो हानिकारक होता है, और अलग अलग तरीक़ों से उसको नापा गया था. यानी इट वाज एक्चुअली researched and measured that children who do screen for, let's say, more than 2 hours in a day on an average, particularly those who do probably 6 to 7 or 6 to 8 hours a day, and there were many children who were doing it already, they have a shorter attention span, difficulty with impulse control, reduced ability to express themselves through language, right? So their language skills are diminished, their social skills are diminished, and depending on the exposure to the media, they often become more violent, aggressive in the way they play or interact with other children.
Yeah.
So there were many things, in their behavior, in the way they thought. Emotional regulation was other thing that they cannot then control, and their frustration tolerance, emotional regulation becomes quite disturbed, right? So these are the things behaviorally and psychologically they found.
All
Even
because of them using
excessive
internet,
internet, excessive screens of all kinds.
Excessive
Yeah?
screens.
Excessive screen, if you hold it as a
general.
broad category, right? And also alongside that, they also did brain scans in these kids, and they found that there are certain parts of the brain which is to do with higher order thinking, memory, again emotional regulation, parts of the brain that actually makes us more mature, more human. They give us this ability to use logic and reasoning. Those parts of the brain are not as well developed. So there was a thinning in the prefrontal cortex, which is again the place where what we call executive skills, or skills of reasoning and logic, they reside. Yeah, the ability to control your own self, understand your own self, they reside. That was thinner. There was a thinning of the, it's called the corpus callosum, which is a bridge, actually. It's a communicating nerve fibers between the two hemispheres, right and the left. वो पतला हो गया था इन बच्चों के अंदर. So there is statistical evidence that there are neurological changes that happen if you do excessive screen, and there are neurodevelopmental changes, there are behavioral changes, there are emotional changes, there are changes in relationships. So across the board, you can see that it impacts children,
There is
adolescents in a very
medical
profound
physiological
way.
evidence.
Medical, physiological, cognitive, psychological evidence that it has a deep, deep impact, right?
So how does one even decipher and differentiate between what will be translated as a lecture to the other person, to the young person, and what will actually land as a valid suggestion?
That's a great question. Yes, indeed. It will depend on many things. Yes, indeed, it's a developmental stage. It's the wiring of the child. How, for instance, there are kids who are really impatient, impulsive, and if you take a long time to think about things and decide, then they get impatient and they'll just walk off, and or they'll get upset and angry with you and say that you can't help me, you don't do anything for me, and so on. That's a possibility. That tends to happen more in teenage years.
Yeah.
Most certainly so. It could also be dependent on the connect and the relationship that you share. And if your child trusts you already, and if you have a good bond and connect, and if you have been spending time in many activities that you both enjoy, not with a parental agenda, mind you. Yeah, and that's important, and we'll come
not
to that
to make
later.
them an expert in
That's
something.
right.
Yeah.
But spend time having fun, having things that are meaningful, joyful, etc. Then your child is much more likely to listen. But each child is different. Some children will listen more once you've listened and processed and fed it back to them. So we often talk about it as you, me, and we approach, which means that
The first person.
the first person is you, and that's the most important. And I'd like you to tell me, to express, to talk about it, and then I'll give you my opinion and my 2 bits and see how these things can match and how we can come to a kind of a
And then it becomes a
understanding that
we.
can there be a dovetailing here, and it becomes a we, that we are in this together then, right? And that comes only if you have been able to work on your relationship with your child and develop and maintain that trust. And it's important again to understand that when children go through transitions like puberty and getting into adolescence, these are all periods of transition, and there are many changes that happen in the way they process these changes, and it can be stressful for them too.
Yeah.
And it's important to understand that and be there for them. So just because you've had very good years when your child was young doesn't mean that the adolescence will also go smoothly, because there are many things that will come and impact them in ways that you can't anticipate. And it's important to confront those transitions together.
Excellent. So I think what I'm taking from all the learning is about listening. It's like, I think what you have said consistently is that how we as parents need to listen to the child, and that there's no particular time to start it or end it, but it's forever. It's
forever.
a lifetime thing. And any time that we realize that there is work to be done, it can be done. We can circle back. And most important is that awareness, that are we listening deep enough? Are we listening without agendas? And we coming from love and compassion, or we coming with fears and crisis? So to recognize that. But you are saying that every problem can be solved by first creating that space of listening with each
Listening,
other.
an emotionally safe space, and focusing on the relationship. Listening is a part of that. Yeah.
So that's doable, possible with everybody. And then being aware that all of us are differently wired. So even if our child looks different from who we are, it's possible, it's natural, it's scientific, it happens.
Yeah.
It has larger reasons than what we know of.
Yeah.
And it's an individual, so they could have a very different wiring. Yeah. And if there is anything which is beyond the understanding of the parent or the family, then going to an expert is absolutely
Professional, I would
professional.
say.
Yeah, going to a professional is absolutely the right thing to do.
Absolutely.
Did I get that right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Good
Thank
student.
you. That was beautifully summarized. Thank you.
तो भाई listening, bond building, trust building, it's obviously very beautiful, but कहना आसान है, करना मुश्किल है. लेकिन शायद और आसान तब हो जाएगा जब हम ये समझेंगे कि वो जो बच्चा जो हमारे लिए सबसे इम्पॉर्टेंट होता है, उसकी पूरी साइकोलॉजी, उसका पूरा इमोशनल बैलेंस, उसकी ग्रोथ पूरी तरह से डिपेंडेंट होती है उसके फैमिली इन्वायरमेंट पे. जो मेडिकल सिचुएशन है, फिजियोलॉजिकल सिचुएशन है, उसकी खुद की वायरिंग है, वो तो अलग है. लेकिन फैमिली इन्वायरमेंट में वो क्या सुन रहा है, जो डबल स्टैंडर्ड्स की बात हो रही है, जो कि आजकल काफ़ी सारा हमारे आसपास होता ही होता है. हम उनको सब कुछ अच्छे से सिखाना चाहते हैं, वैल्यू सिखाना चाहते हैं, लेकिन हम खुद मिस कर जाते हैं. सो स्मॉल एग्जांपल्स जहाँ पे शायद हम देख के भी नहीं देख पाते हैं, बट इट इज़ अ डबल स्टैंडर्ड. बट यहाँ पे बात वैल्यूज़ और मॉरल्स की नहीं हो रही है, बात हो रही है उसके साइकोलॉजी की, कि ये सारी चीज़ें ना उसको कंफ्यूज कर देता है कि ये सही है, कि वो सही है, वो सही है, ये सही है. और ये कितनी जगहों पे उसको असर करता है वो उसके ग्रोइंग अप में हमें दिखाई देता है. तो कभी कभी उसको एक मेडिकल सिचुएशन डेवलप हो जाती है जो शायद ऐसी किसी सिचुएशन से आती है. सो लेट अस बिल्ड अ फैमिली विच हैज़ अ लिसनिंग एंड अ बॉन्ड एंड अ ट्रस्ट in its fundamental structure within the family. तो ये टॉपिक किसी एक कॉन्वर्सेशन से तो नहीं ख़त्म होने वाला है, लेकिन हमारे पॉडकास्ट पे 2 और ऐसी खास कॉन्वर्सेशंस हैं जो आपको ज़रूर सुननी चाहिए. डॉक्टर रजत मित्रा, जो कि साइकोलॉजिस्ट हैं, साइकोथेरेपिस्ट और ऑथर हैं, वो ट्रॉमा में डील करते हैं. और उन्होंने ये बताया है कि ट्रॉमा ट्रांसजेनरेशनल होता है, यानी कि हम अपना ट्रॉमा एक जनरेशन से दूसरे जनरेशन तक बिना जाने समझे पास करते हैं. तो हमारे पास चॉइस ये है कि हम अपना ट्रॉमा अपने तक रखना चाहते हैं या अपने बच्चे तक पास करना चाहते हैं. तो ये ज़रूर सुनिएगा. दूसरी बात उन्होंने ये बताई कि आज का जो यूथ है वो मेरी आपकी जनरेशन से बहुत गुस्सा है, क्योंकि उसका कहना ये है कि हमने उनके लिए छोड़ा ही किया है. अच्छा ही क्या छोड़ा है, पर ऐसा वो क्यों कह रहे हैं, ये सुनिएगा. और दूसरा पॉडकास्ट है जया जायसवाल का, जो कि एक सेक्स एजुकेटर है और पेरेंटिंग कोच हैं। वो खास करके बात करती हैं सेकेंड टाइम पेरेंटिंग की, कि जब हम दूसरी बार माँ या बाप बनते हैं तो क्या चीज़ें हैं जो जाने अनजाने हमसे इग्नोर हो जानी चाहिए लेकिन नहीं होनी चाहिए। सेकेंडली, जब बच्चे एक्सप्लॉइट होते हैं कभी कभी वो उस एक्सप्लॉइटेशन को समझ नहीं पाते हैं, वो एक्चुअली उस टच को एंजॉय कर जाते हैं। अगर कभी ऐसी कोई सिचुएशन आपके सामने आए तो आपको क्या करना चाहिए। थर्डली, जब कोई बच्चा हमारे साथ आके शेयर करता है कि उसके साथ कुछ गड़बड़ हो रहा है, तो हम ये क्यों कह देते हैं कि इट्स ओके बेटा, डोंट वरी। व्हाई वुड वी से दैट? सो लेट्स लिसन टू ऑल दीज प्रोफेशनल्स जो कि कई सालों तक बच्चों के साथ काम करते हैं, पेरेंट्स के साथ काम करते हैं, और इनके जो सजेशंस हैं वो एक लार्जर अप्रोच से आते हैं, ना कि कहीं सुनी बातों से। तो अगर आपके कोई कमेंट्स हैं, कोई क्वेश्चंस हैं, तो यहाँ पे हमें कमेंट करिए या इंस्टाग्राम पे DM करिए। वी विल मेक श्योर कि आपके क्वेश्चंस का जवाब आपको मिले। कीप एंजॉइंग, कीप फ्लोटिंग विद द फिश।